Good evening, everyone. Hello? I cannot whistle. I can't dance. My wife can whistle. How do you think she controls 4 boys and me? Good evening and welcome to the North Carolina Arboretum. We're so happy you're here in Asheville. As a trustee of the Duke Endowment, it's my pleasure on behalf of all the endowment trustees and the staff to welcome you to this evening's Centennial celebration. I'd also like to extend and reciprocate by giving them a warm Asheville welcome to not only the trustees, but also all of the grantees and our partners whom for many, many years have been working with us in a collaborative manner so we can move the mountains and move the people of Western North Carolina forward. So thank you very much for that. I believe we have some of our elected officials in the room, and we'd like to welcome them and thank them for all they do for the region and our community. But it's my most honored to introduce the trustees of the Duke Endowment. So when I call your name, if you don't mind standing, please. Our board chair, Mr. Charlie Lucas, and he'll come up a little bit later. Thank you, Charlie. Mr. Bill Barnett. Dr. Dennis Campbell. Mr. Ravenel Curry. Dr. Pamela Davies. Mr. Harris Deloche. Judge Allison Duncan. Ms. Connie Gray. Mr. Trent Jones. Dr. C.G. Newsom. Mrs. Minor Shaw. Dr. Jean Spalding. Ms. Judy Woodruff. And the former president of the Duke Endowment for 11 and a half years, Mr. Gene Cochran. Now, Asheville in Western North Carolina, you have 100% participation of all the trustees of the Duke Endowment tonight. You have their attention. So earlier this year, we kicked off our Centennial year marking our philanthropic giving across the Carolinas. December 11th, 2024 will commemorate the exact date that Mr. James B. Duke signed the indenture of trust creating the Duke Endowment. So the theme of this past year has been committed to the Carolinas. For 100 years, the endowment has been committed to partnering with communities across North Carolina and South Carolina, 146 counties, I believe, basically investing in 4 areas. One is the higher educational institutions, healthcare, rural United Methodist churches, and the well-being of families and children. So as we gather tonight to celebrate this commitment to the Carolinas, I hope that you will gain an increased awareness of our collective work that we have done with you, and look for future opportunities where we can share and refine what we have done and what we've learned in the past to better improve the lives of the citizens of the Carolinas. Mr. Duke was a builder. He built a great business legacy through his companies. He also was a great philanthropist, and his legacy shines through with the endowment. So your engagement, we hope to continue that legacy for another 100 years. So I'd like to call now the Reverend Dr. Lucy B. Robbins from the Biltmore Village Cooperative Parish to give our invocation for this evening. Reverend Robbins.
Thank you, Jack. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm Lucy Robbins, and have the honor and privilege to be a United Methodist minister here in this space and wonderful place of Asheville, serving Biltmore and Wellspring congregations. It's also a grateful gracious opportunity for me to be here to give the invocation because I am not a one but a two-time recipient of one of the greatest and longest standing grant opportunities through the Duke Endowment, and it's part of the Thriving Rural Communities Initiative as it is known now. And so just having that chance to receive training as a rural ministry fellow, as a master's student and a doctoral student. And so thank you all for sharing in that gift. As my colleagues and I would often say after a prayer of some type, thanks be to God and the Duke Endowment. Let us pray. Almighty God, you have created, redeemed, and sustained all things. We offer our praise and thanksgiving to you for this evening in this space where celebration is unfolding and joy is spreading among colleagues, supporters, and friends. For this fine institution, God, that was birthed, evolved, and prospered greatly over its 100-year lifespan. For its many stakeholders and the incredibly deep impact made upon them. For future beneficiaries whose lives will be expanded and strengthened as a result of their connection with the Duke Endowment. We're grateful, God, for the vision of James B. Duke and the Duke family, as well as for the leadership of all those who have come after him. Board members, executive leadership, staff, and friends who continue his legacy of supporting the endeavors that were so meaningful to him and the greater society. We celebrate the passion and commitment of this incredibly generous organization in its support of children and families, higher education, healthcare, and the rural church. Countless individuals, including many here in Western North Carolina, have benefited from the numerous gifts granted by the Duke Endowment. We pray a blessing over all of these, as well as those whose lives will continue to be touched by this extraordinary institution. And finally, we pray over this meal, asking, Lord, that it might be an encounter of blessing, sustenance, and opportunity. We pray over those who helped bring this food and drink to us, and in celebrating all that is before us this evening, may we remember the generous spirit of one man, and may we seek to embody that same spirit of kindness, compassion, and goodness all the days of our lives. Thanks be to God and the Duke Endowment. Amen. Thank you, Jack.
Please enjoy your dinner brought to you by God and the Duke Endowment.
Hello, everyone. Please continue eating. My name's Charlie Lucas. I'm chair of the Board of Trustees of the Duke Endowment. In the interest of time, we're going to show you a short video that highlights the work of our Summer Literacy Initiative. Since 2012, the Duke Endowment has been working with rural Methodist congregations in North Carolina to combat learning loss in the communities through evidence-informed summer literacy programs for rising first through third graders. This video features 3 of the 22 churches that host yearly summer literacy camps across the state. So several representatives from some of our participating summer literacy sites are here tonight, and we are so glad that you're here. We'd like to thank you for your commitment to this program, but I think this is a great example of some of the work we do through our rural church program area. So please enjoy it, and then I'll be back in just a sec.
This is a congregation that has historically had a lot of school teachers in it, just part of the fabric of who we are. And so when this opportunity came along from the Duke Endowment, things just kind of took off from there based on who we are and what we're good at.
Having a program like this in the church where children can come and learn and feel safe and welcomed, but in an environment that is positive and nurturing, has been really positive.
I've been involved in the camp as a teacher for the past 11 years. I also served as afternoon director for a few years. We started out with just 2 teachers, and now we're up to 3 teachers and 3 classrooms. I hear the parents say the children are excited about reading. They weren't before.
You see good reading growth, obviously. You also see growth in confidence, and you see growth in creativity, and you see some growth in problem solving. And knowing that that's going to carry over into the school year is seriously cool. And to know that I had part in that, oh, that's special.
I really wanted my children to be a part of the summer literacy program so that they could continue their learning throughout the summer. There's such a big gap between one grade ending and the other grade beginning. I thought it was just a really great opportunity for them to be able to continue to grow and to learn.
The traditional school calendar, the summer months are off, and research has shown that students actually lose some of their academic achievement from the previous year during this time. And participating in activities and programs like this one not only prevents students from sliding backwards, but it can allow them to gain momentum and skills, getting them better prepared for the coming school year.
Their reading ability has definitely improved. They're picking up books that they didn't pick up prior. When we go to the library, they're picking up books that are more on their current reading level. They're picking up things that they're excited to learn more about.
The best part is seeing the light bulb go off. When they can finally get it and it clicks, it's like, oh, I just read that word that I couldn't read before.
What I see is the confidence that comes in, and I just see it in my interactions with the kids week to week. I can see that building. I see also in the faces of the parents when they come in here, they feel like their child is ready to go back to school. The confidence that the child brings home is something that grows in the parents as well.
Families get to come and be part of our family engagement nights and build relationships, not only with staff, but with each other through that. And I think that's been a really positive part of the program.
It represents a lot of collaboration between our school district, our community, and the Duke Endowment. This summer program is really bringing amazing opportunities for our students.
It's been amazing to see the ways that the kids really do blossom and grow during their time with the literacy camp. As children who can learn and succeed, I think that's one of the biggest impacts.
We're changing the trajectory of students' lives, and we're making a positive impact. And that's awesome.
It's one of my favorite programs that we fund. It actually was born out of a capstone project of one of our fellows, and it's grown into something that is pretty remarkable across the 2 states or across North Carolina, and we're very proud of it. I wanted to mention Dr. Robbins one more time. So she participated in the Rural Fellows Program at Duke Divinity School. It is the longest continuous program that the Duke Endowment has funded in our history since 1925. And it shows the long partnership that we've had with the rural church in North Carolina, and we're very proud of that too. So thank you for being here tonight. So again, my name is Charlie Lucas, and I am honored to be the chair of our Board of Trustees of the Duke Endowment. The Duke Endowment is a different kind of foundation. We are not one that just regularly accepts applications. We might fund you, we might not. We're very focused in what we do, and there's a reason for that. And there's a story behind it, and what my job is tonight is to give you that story, to tell you the story, to give you context around why the Duke Endowment is what it is and why we do things the way we do things. Because, as you know, we can be a little quirky and unique, but there's a reason behind it. So I think we'll start at the beginning of the Duke family story, and it starts with a guy named Washington Duke. Washington Duke was born in 1820 in rural North Carolina in what is now Durham County. It was Orange County at the time. And while he became a farmer, very poor, and while he had more than others, perhaps, it was a tough life. He married a woman, had 2 children. She died. He was a widower. Married again, had 3 more children, and then she died, and one of his first children died as well. He had a lot of loss in his life. In 1865, he was forcibly conscripted into the Confederate Navy, quickly captured, and then was released, and after being released in New Bern, North Carolina, walked home 130 miles to his farm in what was then Orange County, with, they say, 50 cents and a couple of blind mules when he got home. It was a tough place. His farm was no longer active, but he found some dried tobacco in the barn that he's standing next to in this photograph. And what happened next is a remarkable and uniquely American story. He got his children together, and he said, okay, well, we're gonna figure out a way to survive. And so they processed the tobacco, flailed it, put it through the sieves, packaged it into these muslin bags that his daughter sewed, and they sold their product, which was named Pro Bono Publico, for the public good, off the back of a wagon around North Carolina. It was very popular, and he quickly knew that he had something that was good and was going on, and he continued to grow some tobacco, but he became more of a manufacturer. And his son, Buck, James B. Duke, his youngest son, quickly became a business savant, if you will, and the Dukes quickly grew their business. So in 1870, they had grown to 3 factories on their property, and in early 1872, I believe, built a big brick factory in the thriving town of Durham, just about 4 miles away. Buck Duke takes over the operation of the business, the operations of the business, at 14 years old. He was truly a genius. He moves to New York about 6 years later to take the company's business national. And the Dukes at that point, this is within a span of about 15 years, their business had become one of the largest tobacco businesses, smoking tobacco businesses in the country. But all cigarettes were still hand-rolled at the time. And Buck Duke, who at this point was 25 years old, convinces his brother, Ben, and his father, Washington, that they needed to mechanize the business, they needed to invest in technology, and they needed to change the way the business was done. And so the Dukes partnered with a guy named James Bonsack in Virginia, and this machine changed the world. For better or for worse, changed the world. And the Dukes quickly quickly became the largest cigarette manufacturer in the country and built the business to a point where they had leverage over the others. They convinced the other large cigarette manufacturers in the country to join forces. And in 1889, 1890, James B. Duke and his brother Ben pulled off one of the great business combinations in American business history, and they created the American Tobacco Company. The American Tobacco Company immediately is the largest tobacco company in the United States, controlling about 90% of the market, but also becomes the second largest, or one of the two largest tobacco companies in the world. A few years later, James B. Duke does the same thing in the UK. And through a very complex transaction, and dividing markets and everything else, he creates the British American Tobacco Company, and BAT is still the largest tobacco company in the world. He was a genius. And he did it through marketing and through a willingness, through an understanding of how to reach people. He was the creator of trading cards, if you will. Now, his father didn't like these women that were these scantily clad actresses, but there were dozens and dozens of trading card collections that he created. And in those days, trading cards were not sold in bubblegum packs, they were sold in cigarettes. And it was genius. And he marketed all over the world. Sides of buses, the sides of subway cars, signs on the pyramids in Egypt. It was an amazing, amazing marketing campaign, if you will, right? But all things come to an end, and then in 1908, the United States government decides to enforce the Sherman Antitrust Act, brings an action against the American Tobacco Company. This is actually a picture of the summons that was sent to Ben Duke, his brother, who was a director. And in 1911, the Supreme Court rules against the American Tobacco Company, and the business is essentially split into the tobacco companies that we all grew up with. R.J. Reynolds, Brown & Williamson, Liggett & Myers, the American Tobacco Company, etc. But the Dukes had started to do something about a decade earlier that would change the course of the history of North Carolina and South Carolina. They began to diversify out of tobacco, and they began to invest in textiles, in railroads, in banking, and importantly, hydroelectric power. James B. Duke was fascinated with hydroelectric power. Ben Duke, he didn't really care so much about it, but he and his brother were partners in everything, and they both invested in hydroelectric power, both in Canada and the United States. They were some of the earliest investors in Alcoa, the Aluminum Corporation of America, and in American Cyanamid, which was one of the large chemical companies. They were truly entrepreneurs before their time, way ahead of their time. But for North Carolina, South Carolina, importantly, Duke Power is what they focused on. And beginning in 1905, they founded the Southern Power Company, which becomes the Duke Power Company, which is today Duke Energy, the largest investor-owned utility in the country. And so this economic success allows the family to build a philanthropic legacy. And it began with Washington Duke, really. They began to give away money in the 1880s, but Washington Duke makes a gift in 1890 to this small little Methodist college in Randolph County, North Carolina, Trinity College. And Washington Duke makes a gift that allows that school to move to Durham and provides its first endowment. And Washington Duke changes the course of that school's history and the history of his family. That little school moved to Durham, and his son, Ben Duke, immediately becomes a trustee and that school's largest benefactor for years. Obviously, James B. Duke becomes a great philanthropist. And then Ben Duke's daughter, Mary Duke Biddle, Trent Jones's and my great-grandmother, forms her own foundation. Our very special grandmother, Mary Duke Biddle Trent Siemens, some of whom in this room you probably met her. She was a force of nature and the longtime chair of the Duke Endowment. And she created several foundations. And then, of course, Doris Duke, our cousin, created her own great foundation, which is based in New York today. Oops, hit one too. But importantly, we always think about we always think about James B. Duke when we think about the Duke family's philanthropy. But importantly, it was Ben Duke, his brother, his older brother, who established the pattern of giving that would influence the Duke family's philanthropy for decades and decades, and for 10 decades. Ben Duke, James B. Duke's older brother, was a very quiet, thoughtful, very bright person who was his brother's partner in all their businesses. He was also a very protective and doting older brother. And it was Ben Duke who ultimately influences his brother, and I'll tell you that in a minute. But Ben Duke becomes one of the largest philanthropists in the South at the time, focusing on 4 areas. He focused on giving money to orphanages because he and his brother were half orphans. They lost their mother when they were infants. Hospitals, because they knew that hospitals were important to their communities but also provided access to care. The Methodist Church, which was incredibly important to the Dukes from a spiritual standpoint, and also provided their guidance around giving back to their communities. And then, of course, higher education. And Trinity College was the main focus of their education giving. And so this pattern, it's important to note, carries over. And Ben Duke was his brother's closest advisor. And Ben Duke, who liked to give away his money in his lifetime, knew that his brother could do something special because his brother had not been significantly involved in the family's philanthropy, although he had made some large gifts to Trinity College. So Ben Duke, William Preston Few, who was the president of Trinity College, William Perkins, the Duke's lawyer, and George Allen, Mr. Duke's closest business advisor, all worked on James B. Duke for about 10 years to help him create a gift that would make a difference to the United States and to the Carolinas. And so finally in 1924, December of 1924, Mr. Duke had had enough, and he was like, I'm ready to do this. And he gathered these people together in Charlotte in the first week of December 1924. And he said, we're going to get this done, and we're not leaving this house until we get this done. And now this is in December, So we're not leaving this house until we get this done. And over the next 10 days, they read it out loud to themselves, because Mr. Duke liked to have things read aloud to him. They read it out loud, line by line, word by word, over and over, until they got the language just right. And on December 10th, 1924, they completed the draft of the indenture of trust that created the Duke Endowment and is our guiding document to this day. With an initial gift of $40 million, primarily in Duke Power stock, the Duke Endowment was created, and the initial gift that was directed to go to Trinity College, as long as they changed their name to Duke University, which they did, 2 weeks later. As long as they changed their name to Duke, it created Duke University at the same time. And importantly, Ben Duke's legacy is all over this document as well. So in the indenture of trust, James B. Duke instructs his trustees to support health care in North and South Carolina because he knew that hospitals didn't only provide access to health care, which he was focused on, but they also were economic drivers for their communities. He wanted us to focus on, at the time, orphans and half-orphans, those that are most unable to help themselves, children. Today, we've morphed into something that's much larger and more appropriate for the 21st century. And Rhett will talk about that when he comes up. But the Dukes were particularly sensitive to children and the plight of children without parents. The rural church, of course, and the Methodists, it's hard to underestimate the import. It's hard to, what am I trying to say? It's hard to say, but the Methodist Church was so important to the Dukes and their spiritual development. And Washington Duke had a lot to do with it. But the Methodist Church guided them in their responsibility and obligation to give back to their community. And then finally, higher education. And there are great stories about how some of the schools ended up being part of the indenture, but the Duke Endowment supports Davidson College, Furman University, Johnson C. Smith University, and Duke University. And let me say that the one thing I neglected to say earlier, and it's important to know, and this was Ben Duke's legacy as well, the Duke family, beginning in the 1890s, they supported African American institutions just like they supported majority institutions, white institutions. And they were very, very strong supporters, and they built Lincoln Hospital in Durham, which was an African-American hospital. They were investors in African-American businesses in and around Durham, including North Carolina Mutual, which was at the time the largest African-American insurance company in the United States. And obviously they supported African-American educational institutions and orphanages. And Johnson C. Smith is, of course, one of our great HBCUs located here in the South. So, amazingly, this family that came from nothing created an incredible legacy that supports the two Carolinas. And, you know, Rhett's going to talk about this in a little bit, and I think it's a great thing. But Mr. Duke, we've all seen the bumper stickers, right? Think globally, act locally. Well, that's exactly what he did. They never forgot, the Duke brothers never forgot where they were from. They lived all over. They lived in New York and they lived in Florida. They did all sorts of amazing things, but they never lost touch with the Carolinas. And that is why the Duke Endowment focuses exclusively on North and South Carolina. And it's a gift that we all enjoy today. And I'm blessed, my cousin Trent is blessed to be part of our family's legacy. It's fun to tell the story. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Rhett Mabry, who's going to talk about why we do the things we do today, and he'll do a better job than I did. So.
Well, let me start by saying I will not do a better job than Charlie. Let's go ahead and disabuse you of that notion. Charlie, thank you. I think this is picking me up, yeah. Thank you for that great history of the Duke family and for the formation of the Duke Endowment. Incredible legacy and a wonderful gift to North Carolina and South Carolina. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rhett Mabry, and I have been with the Duke Endowment now for more than 3 decades, for a long time. Let me say it's great to be in Asheville with the cool weather. Can we come up here and meet next week, actually? And the mountains and the sunrises and sunsets. What a beautiful place. And I think this may be our largest gathering. We've been barnstorming all over the Carolinas, and if this is not our largest, it's up there. So it's great to see so many of you out here on a Monday evening to be with us. Thank you so much for doing that. I want to start today by, this went forward. All right, I want to start today by by answering a question that's probably on everyone's mind, and that is, how much money is the Duke Endowment giving away? And if you go back to the beginning, if you go back to 1924, and you add up all our grants for that 100-year period, it adds up to about $4.8 billion, so just under $5 billion. If you were to present value those dollars, though, all into today's dollars, it'd be closer to $11.6 billion is what we've given to the Carolinas. You'll see on the slide that in Asheville, in the western North Carolina, just under $250 million. If you were to present value that, it'd be just under $600 million, $592 million. So a lot of money has been given away to help children and families and students and people in churches and communities, and a lot of what Charlie articulated. Your next question might be, and it should be, what have you accomplished with that money? Because it's not only about giving away the money, it's also about having some accomplishments with that. And what I thought I'd do is I'd share just a few highlights so you can get a sense of what we're doing. Some from the beginning in the early years, some more recently, and that'll give you some sense of what we think we've accomplished. Obviously, not everything that we've funded has been a success, but we do have some things we're particularly proud of. And then after that, as Charlie alluded to, I'll shift gears and talk a little bit about how we think about our work today. So let's review a few accomplishments. Charlie mentioned our support to healthcare as one of our 4 areas enumerated by James Buchanan Duke. And if you go back to the beginning, if you go back to 1925 and you go from 1925 to 1942, that first 17-year period, the Duke Endowment gave away about $175 million, that's in today's dollars, $175 million to build and equip hospitals. The goal was to increase access to care and particularly build hospitals in counties and communities that did not have one. In fact, the first hospital built with Duke Endowment funds in 1928, first new hospitals, we did some renovation of existing ones, but the first new one was in Haywood County, so right next door. But recently we had a study that looked at this growth. We did not commission this, but I can tell you we were very pleased to hear about it. It looked at this growth and this increase in access to care, and they calculated that in counties that previously did not have a hospital, infant mortality, the decline in infant mortality approached double-digit percentages, almost 10%. And for African Americans, the rate of decline in infant mortality was more than twice the rate as it was for whites. So that's a significant accomplishment. One of the first things that happened in higher education, as Charlie mentioned, is that Trinity College became Duke University, and both East and West campuses were built, including this iconic chapel on Duke's West campus. But for all 4 of our schools, for Duke, for Davidson, for Johnson C. Smith, and for Furman, the Duke Endowment has been a steadfast supporter for a century now. In fact, here's an interesting data point. There have been years when, particularly in the 1930s, but even in the 1960s, where our grant dollars to a school during a given year approached and then sometimes exceeded tuition revenue for that school in that year. So said more simply, there have been years when our dollars literally helped to keep the doors open at one of our 4 schools. Charlie also mentioned our early support to orphanages, and he talked about how that's morphed now into putting more money upstream toward prevention and early intervention. One example of this, recent example in the last couple of decades, is our work with Duke University over the past 20 years to develop and test and replicate a program called Family Connects. Now, Family Connects is a universal home visitation program. It's for everyone in the community, and it helps newborns and their families. And we paid for a randomized control trial in Durham where that was launched, and after a 5-year period, we saw a 38% reduction in child abuse and neglect. And Family Connects, importantly, after having started in one county, Durham County, North Carolina, is now in 40 communities across 20 states. Charlie also mentioned our support to Rural United Methodist Churches, and he spoke eloquently of just how important religion and faith were to the Duke family. And I agree with him. I think it was the impetus for their charity and their philanthropy. In recent years, and this goes to some of the comments that we had at our table today, In recent years, we've invested heavily in clergy health to change policies and practices to keep clergy healthy. Because as some of you are caregivers in this room, and you know the first instinct is to take care of others and neglect yourself. What we're trying to do is create practices and a mindset and a policy where clergy take care of themselves so they can help their congregants. And we've had some encouraging results relative to comparison groups. We've seen a 13% reduction in metabolic syndrome, a 41% reduction in stress symptoms, and a 55% reduction in anxiety for our clergy who have gone through this programming. So that gives you some sense of things that we're particularly proud of. What I want to do now is I want to shift gears and talk about the Duke Endowment today and how we think about our work. And whenever I do that, I always use this slide because I think it captures the essence of the Duke Endowment. We are a foundation that is committed to donor intent. We take Mr. Duke's direction and trust indenture very seriously. In fact, in that trust indenture, he wrote that he wanted it read aloud once a year to the full board so that they, now our staff join these meetings, so they and we can be reminded of what James Buchanan Duke's wishes were. And it's a highly effective practice for trying to keep people faithful to what you're trying to accomplish. At the same time, we recognize, and fortunately James Buchanan Duke recognized, that we'd have to make changes to adapt as the world has changed over the last century. He gave our board full discretion to make those adjustments and those adaptations. So hence this slide, you're probably wondering what this slide has to do with any of this. But this is the healthy tension or the balance that plays out in almost every one of our board meetings, and we have one tomorrow, and I bet it's going to play out in that as well. And that is, how do we remain faithful to Mr. Duke's wishes, but how do we do it in a way that ensures we're relevant 100 years later? A recent adaptation was in 2017, and when the board decided to adopt early childhood 0 to 8 as a point of emphasis for the Duke Endowment. And in doing so, the board was compelled by emerging brain science that shows just how important the early years are for children and their families. I hasten to add, though, that in doing this, the board was not rewriting the trust indenture. They were not adding a fifth division of the Duke Endowment. Rather, we see early childhood and effective investment in early childhood as a way to further Mr. Duke's ends, articulate in his vision for the Carolinas. So if we strengthen families, we should have fewer children in the child welfare system over time. If children and families get off to a healthier start, that should lead to a healthier population. If our churches do this work, they should be more relevant in their community, and our community should be stronger. And if a child obviously is reading at grade level by third grade and doing math and performing in math at grade level by third grade, that's a milestone on the pathway to post-secondary education in a more educated society. 0 to 8 is also an important strategy. I'll add, not our only strategy, but it's an important strategy for how we address issues of race and poverty, which are stubbornly persistent in North Carolina and South Carolina and across our country. Now, admittedly, it's not a quick fix. It's a longer-term play. But investing in children and families to help them get off to a good start, to build skills and to develop healthy habits may be the best approach toward ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity to live into their potential. There's several pearls of wisdom in Mr. Duke's trust indenture, and this is by far my favorite because I think it really is pertinent today, and I'll paraphrase it for you. James Buchanan Duke wrote in his trust indenture, "I might have tried to do more, but I fear that in doing so, I would accomplish less by reason of attempting too much." I would have tried to do more, but I fear that I would accomplish less by reason of attempting too much. As Charlie said, the original trust indenture amount was $40 million. A year later, his estate gave another $60 million to the Duke Endowment. So by 1925, the Duke Endowment had about $100 million. But even with that kind of money, back in 1925, James Buchanan Duke knew that he had to be focused if he was going to make a difference. That's why we spend so much of our time today trying to clarify our strategies so that we can be precise and use our dollars with purpose and meaning and strategically. Let me show you why that's important. So each year in North Carolina and South Carolina, as long as our assets are where they are, the Duke Endowment will give away about $50 million a year for healthcare purposes. Now, if you think about it, year after year after year, as long as our assets are where they are, we're going to give away $50 million a year. That's a lot of money. Except when you consider that each year in North Carolina and South Carolina, almost $200 billion a year is spent on healthcare. So in reality, our $50 million is a drop in the bucket. It's less than 0.03%, which means we have to be strategic, we have to be thoughtful, and we have to be focused. In healthcare, we think of ourselves as an accelerating partner. We want to take the innovation that naturally occurs in healthcare. You have smart people, you have 20% of the GDP, and you have market forces. What that leads to is innovation. We want to take that innovation, we want to vet it further, and we want to prepare it to serve more people and change more lives, to move it to scale more quickly. Finally, we are data-driven. We use data to make informed decisions about the policies for which we advocate and to select the programs and the interventions that we fund. Now, when I say data, first thing I think of is quantitative, and of course, that's part of it. But I also want to emphasize the qualitative side of data. We know, fortunately, we've always known that we have to listen to you, our grantees, because you're closer to the ground. But we also have to listen to and our grantees have to listen to the communities. We cannot do unto others and hope to be successful. Top-down philanthropy or even top-down intervention on the part of nonprofits is not going to work. We've got to engage the grantees and the nonprofits, and we have to engage the community. We also need to know that we need to build new data and build new evidence to fashion new solutions to address the challenges of today as well. So let me summarize. We are adaptive to Mr. Duke's wishes, we're adapted to a changing world, while remaining faithful to Mr. Duke's wishes. We strive for strategic clarity, and we're data-driven. Now, if Mr. Duke came back today, I think he would be proud of where we are and how we're positioning ourselves and how we're thinking about our work. I love talking about it, and I believe we're on the right path. But none of this works. None of this works at all. It's just words on paper without all of you in this room, without your partnership in your work. Those of you who get up every morning, and people like you all across North Carolina and South Carolina, by the way, who get up every morning to help someone else, to help someone in need, to help a child, a parent, a family member, an adult, someone who needs help. There are a lot of folks in this room who get up every day thinking about helping them out. After all, you're the ones, not the Duke Endowment, you're the ones who are holding a child's hand. You're the ones who are comforting a parent and building new skills. You're the ones who are treating sick patients and teaching healthy habits. You're educating young children and young adults in our colleges and universities. It's you who are doing this, not us. And each of you in your own way are sharing the love of humanity and the love of humankind, which is what James Buchanan Duke was doing 100 years ago today. Translated from original Greek, the word philanthropy means love of humanity. Mr. Duke loved humanity, and his foundation was an expression of that love. And all of you love humanity and your fellow mankind as well because of your love for them. I know I speak for our board and our staff when I say how humbled and honored we are to have an opportunity to work with each of you year in and year out, day in and day out, month in and month out, that we get to work with you and see the wonderful work that you do in your community. One of our former trustees, Russell Robinson, was a longtime board member and also board chair of the Duke Endowment. I once heard him describe our grantees as inspired and inspiring. The inspired part makes sense because you are inspired. You have to be motivated to do the work you do, despite disappointments and frustrations and hardships. But what you may not realize is that you're inspiring too. And I can speak for the Duke Endowment in this case because you inspire us. Because you're driven to get better, you drive us to get better. Not to rest on how much money we have or how much money we've given away, but to rather to make a difference with Mr. Duke's largesse and his gift and his philanthropy. So thank you for doing that. You're actually what makes our work. We have great jobs, we really do. And you are what, because of the work you do, you're what makes our work so special and enjoyable. So with that, I want to let's hear from one of our grantees who's working in this region. Brett Loftus is the Chief Executive Officer of Crossmore Communities for Children. His bio is in front of you in your material, so please take a look at that. I'll not recite it. Brett is a longtime partner of the Duke Endowment, having started his career in Charlotte with the Council for Children's Rights and having founded, while he was there, the Larry King Center for Children. He is a passionate and committed advocate for children. And I can tell you this, you are in for a treat because he's also a very passionate and effective speaker. Brett, if you'll join me.
Thank you, and thank you for this invitation to be at this great celebration. Although I will admit, I accepted this invitation because I thought this was a roast of Rhett Mabry. And so we will have to reschedule and do that at another time. In thinking back about the impact of the Duke Endowment has impacted my entire adult life. In fact, I think they may be following me. Many years ago, I was a young high school student in rural South Carolina who had the interest and the aptitude to go to the best colleges, but not the finances. I was a first-generation college student, and I wanted to go to a great school not too far from where my parents lived, but we couldn't afford it. And Furman University made it possible for me to go to that school. And I will be forever grateful for the Duke Endowment and your many, many years of support for my alma mater, who made it possible to accept students like me. So much so that I got to graduate from there without debt. So I got to really lean into the call on my life to be a professional child advocate. And when I went to law school for that intention, I thought I had really won the lottery. And to get to do my dream job and move to Charlotte and work with incredible folks like Larry King, who is a dear friend of Rhett's and mine and many of others of you, and to be a child advocate. And very quickly, I got to learn about the Duke Endowment's impact. And its impact was in such a unique way because those of us who run nonprofits know we don't have research and development arms. We don't have venture capitalists. We don't have angel investors. So all of our innovation is done around the edges. And whenever we had an innovative idea, we wanted to do something new, data-driven, evidence-based, to change the trajectory of children's lives, we'd call the Duke Endowment. And they were always ready to partner. I had no idea that impact would continue with my career. After 13 years doing that work, the call continued, and I moved to a little tiny town in rural North Carolina called Crossmore, population 234, to run one of those historic orphanages that the Duke Endowment had been funding for many, many years. In fact, one of two of our longest-serving donors of Crossmore Communities for Children is the Duke Endowment. And Crossmore really represents two of those historic orphanages because the Children's Home in 1909, started by the Western Conference of the United Methodist Church to serve children very similar to those described in the Duke Endowment's trust. And those two organizations have more than 115 years of history of serving those children. In fact, we were a big part of the child welfare system before there was a public child welfare system. One of the reasons I joined that organization is because they started doing this really interesting thing and following the data and the science around trauma and the way trauma impacts a body, especially a developing child and their brain. And no one was talking about trauma 20 years ago, but about that time, the Duke Endowment funded Crossnor's investment in becoming one of the first nationally certified trauma-informed agencies. That work we could have never paid for on our own. That innovation led to many years now of further research and development. And in 2018, we launched the National Center for Trauma Resilient Communities, where we get to share that knowledge given to us by Duke Endowment support and go around the country. We've now trained almost 10,000 people nationwide in 12 different states. That work is transforming not only the work that we do with individual children and families, but organizations like us all around the country. Similarly, we've all been frustrated with the outcomes of the child welfare system, ones that have the most vulnerable children and families in them, but don't always get the best outcomes for our investment. And again, we went to the Duke Endowment to say, we can do this differently. Let's build a model to professionalize foster care so we can support those fragile parents and teach them and coach them and support them in the reunification with their children. That professional foster parenting model, called Bridging Families, just was announced to be adopted as North Carolina's state model for professional foster parenting. Thank you. You cannot do that kind of innovation. You cannot have those kinds of outcomes unless you have partners that are willing to invest in sometimes an idea that's half-formed, that you've put together based on wisdom and experience, but also you don't know if it's going to work. And you need people who are willing to take a risk to do that. I'm so thrilled to be able to partner with the Duke Endowment, to be able to see the vision that Mr. Duke had that is carried out so aptly now by the board and staff there. And I'll have to say, once again, my life interacts with the Duke Endowment. I'm a member of a small United Methodist Church in LA, which is Lower Avery County. We have gotten up to 30 to almost 35 on a Sunday, and we literally could not do the ministry we do in our community without the investment in the rural church. I am so thrilled that my worlds have collided in many ways, and the Duke Endowment has been at the center of a lot of those. And just this last general conference or annual conference, the Bishop of the Western North Carolina United Methodist Church announced a partnership between Crossnor's Center for Trauma Resilient Communities and the Western Conference. And for the next 2 to 3 years, we will be working closely together to build healing-centered congregations where both pastors and lay leaders understand the impact of trauma, the science of building resilience, and how we make our churches places where everyone can come and heal. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. Thank you for the future opportunity when we roast Rhett. I'm excited about that. And also, thank you, God, and the Duke Endowment.
Well, I think you know why we wanted Brett to speak. Brett, congratulations again. Thank you. Let me just say thank you again. Let me just say thank you for all the good work you do. Thank you for challenging us to be better and keep doing that, because that's how we get better. Thank you for being willing to make mistakes and being transparent about that. Thank you for all that you do. And we appreciate that completely. This concludes our program. I've got 2 announcements to make, actually, and then a third, actually. So one is, on your way out, I think going this way, there are books on a table commemorating our Centennial. So please take one of those with you. That'll be our gift. Secondly, now I used to do these the other way around, and you'll see why in a second. Secondly, everyone has materials in front of them at your place. One of those at each table on your materials has a purple dot. And if you are the lucky one that has a purple dot, you get the centerpiece flowers. That's it, I think. So if you have a complaint about not getting the dot, go see Charity Perkins. Yeah. All right. One last thing, if our board will stay here, we need to get a photo of all 14 of the board members who are here tonight. We want to get a photo of that. Thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for your great work. Travel safely, and thank you for being here.